Prophecy headlines: Israel elections fallout, 16 June 2021. As previously shown, I always start these out saying everything is aligned and the rapture could occur at any time. Many of the prophecies lay dormant for 1,878 years, but with the rebirth of Israel in one day in 1948, all these prophecies have come awoken again. Now, not the woke like the woke culture we have, but the Spirit of God is moving now and allowing us to know that it is the end of days we are moving towards. And how do we know that? Fulfillment of prophecy. Prophecy is but history yet to unfold, and prophecy is unfolding now before our eyes, and we can see these many things that have occurred. Israel reborn, Jerusalem's the capital, an increase in travel and knowledge. We can go anywhere in the world right now in a matter of 24 hours. Knowledge increase. You walk around with a handheld computer that accesses almost all the data in the world, and some of it you don't want to see. In fact, most of it is garbage, but there is good things we can access. So knowledge is increasing. Wisdom, not so much. You got to get that from the Bible and the Bible alone. The gospel preached throughout the world, and we are. The Gideons are out there. They're translating the word. The word's getting out by telecast, so the gospel is being preached. Beast technology facilitates worldwide comms. At some point in Revelation, you have the two witnesses, and their death and their resurrection and their rapture will be a worldwide televised event, whether the Antichrist wants it to be or not, and that technology is available now. Beast tech, able to control all the world's commerce and make people to take the mark of the beast, or they cannot buy, sell, or trade. That technology is in place, has been in place for 10 years. It's only the implementation that is required. Denial of these signs by scoffers. Just mention that you believe in Bible prophecy and you're going to get a lot of strange looks like you got three eyes. So that's out there, and it's only going to get worse, but it's bad enough now. It's there. Ezekiel 38, 39 aligned inside. We're going to talk about that in part today, because that impacts upon what occurs next in Israel after these elections. And again, what has not been resolved and fulfilled remaining in prophecy. There's three big things that I've put up here. One world religion, that is forming right now. One world government, that is forming right now, and we can see those things. And part of that includes the preparation for the 10 global kingdoms that will occur. And guess what? The United States will be within one of those kingdoms, or be one of those kingdoms. And prep for the third temple, we often discuss that. Here are all the scripture verses for all those. The thing that we are waiting for now to begin that 7-year tribulation period is that Daniel 27 7-year covenant that will be signed between many Jews and the Antichrist. And that's why today's election is interesting, because it has a potential ripple towards that eventual occurrence that will lead us into that 7-year tribulation period. Again, we are now inching along a little bit at a time, a little headline at a time, until the next big trigger event of God, and only God knows what that is. Now, Israel's election occurred, and they have made their decisions. I'll get into that in a minute. But this is the world situation that we can look in right now and see where the world's at as far as the primary players in the Middle East are concerned. You have Iran. It is a devout hater of Israel. Rouhani is a cleric, and he's in charge of it. He's a mullah. He's in his second term. You can only hold 2 terms in Iran. He's at the end of his. They're going to have elections soon. But do you think anything will change? No. It will be totally vetted by the mullahs there. Whoever's in charge will be a religious person that toes the party line. So is there going to be a change for Israel there on the earth as far as world players? No. In fact, they're going to pursue the bomb and have the atomic bomb. And it looks like nothing is going to stop them now besides potentially Israel. The United States is not going to help them. So that situation has not changed and will not change. Russia. It's got Putin in control of it. He's essentially a dictator for life. Don't see that changing anytime in the future unless God calls him home through his death. So could that occur? Yes, but he's in power until he dies, or until someone takes him out, because he is not going to leave that position. Turkey, you have Erdogan. Yes, they have elections there, but don't tell me those elections aren't rigged and aren't influenced. Joanna, my light's on there again. If you could turn the light on, off on that. So Erdogan considers himself the new sultan of the emerging Ottoman Empire that will occur to lead the Turks into whatever utopian existence the Turks want to have with Erdogan in their lead. He will not change. So another thing, we already have proxies all the way around him. Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen are all the proxies of these various players above. Iran, Russia, Turkey. They're all influencing these smaller regional states. Can Israel really count on any of these smaller states? No, they cannot, because of the big players, the top three. You got the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with Prince Salman. He's a monarch. He will not change. He's young. He's in his 30s, so he's there for a long time. You have the Gulf Arab monarchs that are in place. And, you know, if one of them passes away, another monarch in that chain will take the place. Will that change? We have seen of late there has been the Accords of Abraham, and those might influence change, but now with the United States out of the picture, that all comes into question. You have Jordan and Syria. They have monarchs, and they have already agreed to some type of treaty with, or I shouldn't say Syria had. Jordan has agreed with Israel in a form. So I've got Syria on there twice. That is an error. I should have taken that out. You got Egypt. It's got President Sisi, who took over in a dictatorial coup, and he is honoring the Arab or the Egyptian agreements with Israel that was set up by Anwar Sadat. So you have the EU. They are left-leaning governments. They desire to have that renewal with that JCPOA, which is the nuclear deal that's going on. Their current leader is Macron of France, and he has risen in power, and he's always a mouthpiece for the EU now. You have the United States now. It has the most liberal government that it has ever had in history. And you have China with Xi Jinping. He's the dictator for life of the Chinese Communist Party. So, how does that political landscape look for Israel? Not so great. This is how I see it, in relationship biblically, with a biblical perspective. The top three we've already discussed for years is Iran, Russia, Turkey. They are all part of the Gog-Magog war machine that is coming, that's foretold in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Again, as discussed, the lackeys are Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. They're all proxies. You have Ezekiel 38:13, which talks about the fence setters that are supposedly friends of Israel, but sit back and watch it all happen. That includes the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Arabs. The Jordanians and Egyptians aren't mentioned in Ezekiel 38 and 39. The EU and the United States are also those fence setters. And then you have China, which is in biblical prophecy, but they are coming in later. So that is the political landscape right now, and that is what Israel is moving into. One of the big things to look at in terms of turmoil this year associated with elections is the U.S. elections. And the U.S. right now, we can see, has changed dramatically. U.S. subordinates its interest to help form the one world government as it slowly becomes part of the 10 kings of Daniel 7:24 and Revelation 7:12, which shall serve the Antichrist. So we see the United States shifting towards globalism. We're on overdrive getting us there. We also see the shiny objects, is what I call them, to distract you from the real picture that is going on. Putin was literally caught laughing at Biden's claim that he was a killer and dismisses the U.S. president as a career politician ahead of their talks, which occurred, I think, just today. in Switzerland. But he gets no respect whatsoever. Putin's like Biden's boogeyman. Look over here at what he's doing when you ignore all the horrendous policies that are occurring in the United States. Again, Zelensky's rules for communists and radical government is to have shiny objects to look at. Putin is the shiny object of Biden, and he's what's distracting you with. When in reality what he's doing is he is turning over the United States to foreign entities in the form of giving our money and our treasure, our children's future, to these other countries by, here it is, Macron, again, he's stepping up as the EU leader, seals his bromance with laughing Joe Biden and takes a swipe at Trump as he praises him for being part of the club now and willing to cooperate and insist America is definitely back. Very sad. The U.S. has done a 180-degree turn and pursues the globalism of the Obama era. Now we have to understand that God is allowing this to occur for his greater purposes. Just as he put in Biden for a purpose, just as he put Trump in for a purpose, Biden is there to do the work that God allows him to do. Now we should never think that Biden has God's permission to enact his policies. But instead, God allows him to take the U.S. down the path that will lead to the eventual return of his son, Jesus Christ. Now, some of the things Biden is doing is getting us towards that one world government. And he is moving the nation in that direction as he ignores the Constitution in many ways. And he has recently, judges ruled against him, told him just that his policies, some of his policies are unconstitutional. So it took 6 months for Biden to essentially change the political landscape of the world. And he's not alone in that, because the world has been turning ever and ever more towards this one world government. So into all this we see the Israeli election. 12 years Benjamin Netanyahu has been leading Israel. And we always need to watch Israel. Israel's election potentially mean there is a dramatic shift in the offing in the Middle East. As in the U.S. elections, God sets up and takes down kings for his greater purposes, and these things that are occurring are aligning us ever closer to that 7-year tribulation period and the war that precedes it. What will the stability be? You see a number of headlines here. Abbas on coalition crisis. Abbas is the leader of the Muslim faction. He's down in that Ramad head, Masr Abbas. He's down here in the lower left-hand corner as you're looking at it, or right-hand corner. He is a Muslim now. He's the first ever Muslim in charge as part of the leading coalition in Israel. Interesting. We also have a Druze for the first time ever. You have a disparate group of political parties, and they really only had one thing in common. They all hated Netanyahu, and they wanted him out of power so they could have the power, so they could share the power that was there. Bennett is the new prime minister, and he is the one that will lead Israel. And if you want to see more of who he is, I put this up here. Go and search for it. This is all from the Jerusalem Post, and it'll tell you more about him. Bennett's party only had 6 of 120 parliamentary seats in the Knesset. But his coalition was able to cobble together, and he took a little from here, a little from there, a little from the right, a little from the left, a little from the center. These very small chunks, added them all together, and he got 60 votes versus 59 votes. Now the force behind this coalition is Yair Lapid, a political centrist who will become prime minister in 2 years in a rotation agreement if the government lasts that long. So you have this very disjointed group of people with varying interests leading Israel. So it's a sea change. We don't know exactly what is going to happen. Now, a little more about him. He says he is far right. In fact, he claims to be further right than Netanyahu was. But he only has 6 people in his party. And how could somebody that far right agree to form a coalition with all these left, all these different groups that have such varying political desires? How can he hold them together? Now, turning back to the Bible and what is going to happen next in terms of prophecy, in that 7-year tribulation, to kick that off, there is a treaty that needs to be signed that prophesied by Daniel 9:27. And that's that 7-year prophecy with the Antichrist. I could never see how the leader of Israel could sign that 7-year peace treaty. Never could. I couldn't see how Netanyahu could do it, specifically, based upon who he is and what he said and what he has proven to be over the last few years. But now, this horrific task, and that is exactly what it is. In Isaiah 28:18, it says, this is a covenant with death and hell. But at some point, some leaders in Israel will sign this treaty with the Antichrist. Will it be this man that signs that treaty? It's very possible that could happen. Because again, he's in the leadership role. And he's pragmatic. I would say, go and look at the Jerusalem Post. It says, who is Israel's new prime minister? And you will see he worked for Netanyahu, but still he broke away. I see this gentleman as a political opportunist. He ran 2 companies, started it from the ground up in the United States. These were internet-based companies. Had one worth $150 million, sold it, formed another one, brought it to $120 million, sold it, and then he moved to Israel and became a politician. So, interesting background. He is now the new prime minister, as the parliament voted him in, and now there's a 12-year end to Benjamin Netanyahu's reign. In my very humble opinion, this political upheaval now has the politics in Israel on the edge. It's an upheaval. As we inch forward ever and ever closer to the next predicted events in prophecy. And what are those events? Those events are this Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, but we but await the next great trigger events. Now, what is the trigger event that may lead to that Ezekiel 38 and 39 war? We know it is unfulfilled prophecy. We know it will bring many Israelis back to Israel and worshiping. But what will trigger that? Or is it just going to be a slow, gradual slide as we move closer and closer? We saw all the players lifted there, and we've been discussing this for over 6 years now, where I said these folks will arise and these folks will be closer together in ties, and this is what happened. And it's just prophetic fulfillment of a 2,600-year Ezekiel prophecy. Go there and look at that prophecy. But it could be triggered by the rapture, economic collapse, and if you look at all the cryptocurrencies and our debt spending and everything that's going on right now, inflation, go out and try to get a used car, go out and try to get furniture, go out and try to get things. More and more, as those items become harder and harder to obtain, the prices are going up. Same for housing. We do not know what's going to happen, but God does, and He could trigger any of these events at any time. Natural disaster could trigger this. Look at the droughts that are going on in the West. Could that continue? God controls the rain. It's up to Him whether He wants to trigger a event. If you want to look at the caldera at the Yellowstone, it could blow at any moment and wipe out 2/3 of the United States like that. So God's hand is holding back many things. And the only thing it does is take God to gradually remove His hand to unleash the events that are necessary to bring about this crisis in the Middle East. A man-made one occur. You've heard of the electromagnetic pulse. If an EMP occurs over the United States, it could wipe out every piece of electronics that we have.
That's our
Just a
whole
fact.
world.
Yeah, that's everything.
Everything.
Every car has a computer. Everything in your house now has a computer. Could it occur? I don't want it to occur. I'm just saying what the possibility is, and that's out there. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And all those have been played out in movies over and over again. But again, there are trigger events that could occur. Or even we could have this slow, gradual move to the Ezekiel 38-39 war, which will end God's protection. And this is where the second one, the burdensome stone. Right now we know Israel is supernaturally protected by God. He intervenes in all these wars. You go back and look at some of the histories of all these wars that occurs in Israel, and you'll see the hand of God. They have never been defeated in battle. And that's what the Ezekiel chapter 12, verse 3 prophecy is all about. Anybody coming against Israel will be broken to pieces and cut on the rocks. And that's what it is. Israel is under that protection. But at some point, when they sign that 7-year peace treaty, God will remove his hand from the nation, and he will put it upon the remnant of Israel. So go back and look at that prophecy. But these two studies present this to you so you will understand as we move closer towards that. I will leave with the following. These are Netanyahu's parting shots and his warnings that he provided on 14 June as he is leaving. And you have to understand who this man is. He was the leader of Israel during 12 years. And again, Israel is the apple of God's eye. So God put him in that place for that time for his purpose. And this is his assessment of Israel and what they need to be concerned about. And again, what Israel needs to be concerned about is what we as watchers of prophecy need to be concerned about as well. So I'll just go ahead and read this. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu used his final speech in front of the Knesset Sunday to vow a swift return to office, attack his replacement, and call out Biden administration's effort to revive the nuke deal with Iran. Netanyahu, 71, stepped aside for the new coalition government led by Naftali Bennett, who became the new prime minister after a 60-59 vote. Skin of the teeth. And that always seems how these certain rulers get in there by the skin of their teeth. Not all the dictators we talked about, not all the kings and the monarchs have to worry about that. But in a democracy, and Israel is a democracy, that's what they have to concern themselves with. President Biden...
It would have been more than that if the Democrats would have showed them how to do mail-in ballots.
I don't know. These are all, the way they have is a parliamentary. So you vote somebody into the ruling body, that 120, and they cast their vote on who the president will be. British has the same kind of system. It's not a direct vote like you and I have for president and vice president of the United States.
Right, yes. But all of those voters and lawmakers, that 120, are they supposed to represent constituents in their area like they are for us?
Yes.
Okay, well see, that's what the breakdown is in our government. Our government doesn't care what their constituents say.
Yep. Once they get in there, they can do anything they want. Yeah, we're a representative republic is what we are. We pick our people that represent us, and we hope they vote in the direction we have voted them in for, but sometimes they don't. In this case, the 6 people that were voted, the members of parliament, or I should say the Knesset that they have, that voted for Bennett, were a lot of the people that voted for him were enraged because here he is, the most conservative person, supposedly according to him, the most far-right person cozying up to people on the left. Would you like that if your representative did that? No, you wouldn't.
It's underhanded.
Yeah, and that's what they said as well. So anyway, that's the system that they have in place. And of course, as I've said over and over again, if you were Satan, where would you spend your time and influence? Would you spend it out in rural Tennessee, or would you spend it in Washington, D.C.? Because that's where the power base is. So they are corrupting people there in the Knesset, just like they do down in Washington, D.C. with our 512 representatives that we have in the Congress. So, same thing. So, in my opinion, Satan got his man in there. Netanyahu was a stalwart defender and proven asset, and they replace him with what? Unknowns, multiple parties vying for whatever they want in an undefined role. It's just, if I was in Israel and I had voted for this man, I would be furious too. But what do? Vote him out the next time. That's the only thing you can do.
How often do they have elections?
I'm not certain. I'm not certain. But again, they have to have, when you have a parliamentary government, these 60 people have to agree where they're going all the time. If not, they call do a revote. That's the way the Italians are. That's why they have they've been since World War II. Italy has had like 150 or 60 governments because they can't agree on anything in Italy. So that's just the nature of the beast.
So what I'm asking you that for is Netanyahu said that he will have a swift return to office. So what he's planning on is there being strife in the ranks, and then him coming back in and saying, "Look, I told you, we need to get back to normal." Yes,
but again, who knows? Right now, he's not in charge. So there's a window of opportunity there for somebody is going to look at this just like they look at the United States and go, "Dadgum, Biden's in there. I can get away with X, Y, and Z." So now they probably consider Israel in a weakened state because they have this loose coalition government that is out there, and they're untested. So when you're an untested person, what do people do? Your adversaries. Well, they test you. So Israel is likely going to be tested. And it might be in this time of Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. We don't know. But you've got right now a change in the Middle East power structure, in Israel's power structure, that might lead us to that Ezekiel 38 and 39 war and the following 7-year treaty with hell and death that is the Antichrist saying out. Okay. So Netanyahu said Iran is celebrating this loss because they understand that starting today there will be a weak and unstable government that will align with the dictates of the international community. So he's concerned about globalism. He's concerned about how this coalition will change Israel's foreign policy, their defense policy that they've had for decades. How will they deal with a belligerent Iran? They knew how Netanyahu would deal with him in Iran. They knew how Trump would deal with him in Iran. But now they have Biden in the United States, weak, and they have this untested new government in Israel. What would your adversaries probably do? Test you. And he's just saying just what we talked about. Netanyahu held a joint press conference with the top diplomat and said, "I can tell you that I hope the United States will not go back to the old joint comprehensive plan of action because we believe that deal paves the way for Iran to have an arsenal of nuclear weapons with international legitimacy / approval there." Netanyahu said, referencing the acronym of the nuclear deal formerly called the Joint Cooperative Plan of Action. So that is what we see. His primary concern is once Iran gets those nukes, they become the nuclear bully on the block. Now, Israel, of course, has nuclear weapons. But now, if Iran gets them, they are going to hold sway. They're going to hold power and threat because they are absolute religious fanatics. And they're waiting for the 13th Imam and the war that's associated with, or the 12th Imam.
Well, if they get it, it forces Israel and us and all of the Middle East to come to the bargaining table.
Yeah, I mean, if they even want to bargain.
Right.
And who knows what the Iranians want to do. We also reiterated that whatever happens, Israel will always reserve the right to defend itself against a regime committed to our destruction. Namely, Iran and a number of other countries want to destroy them and always have. Committed to getting the weapons of mass destruction for that end, the Israel Prime Minister added. Netanyahu remains head of the largest party in the parliament. So of that 120, he's got the largest voting bloc. But that's why they had to cobble this coalition together to go around that. The new coalition is a patchwork of small and mid-sized parties that collapse if any of its members decide to bolt. Bennett's party, for instance, holds just 6 of the 120 seats, and he's the prime minister. I think that's just amazing. The driving force behind the coalition is Yair Lapid, a political centrist who will become prime minister in 2 years in a rotation agreement between Bennett if the government lasts. So Bennett, I don't know whether it's French or English pronunciation, is now in the position of power to set the table for the Antichrist and usher the world into that 7-year tribulation period. If it occurs in his watch, he potentially is the one that will sign that treaty. And I think that is extremely fascinating
We got
to
to
consider.
really pay close attention.
I mean, I don't think you'll be able to ignore it in the headlines. And again, what is going to bring us to that to that Ezekiel 38 and 39 war? I don't know, but all the parties are there. They're formed. God says himself he is going to put a hook in the jaw of Gog, Magog, and drag him down. So it is when God determines the situations are right that it will occur.